Hey everybody, my name is Eric Conley. I'm the Garrett County 4-H Youth Development Agent, and I am doing a presentation for the Kentucky Women in Agriculture. And this presentation is going to be about native Kentucky orchids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and we will get started with the presentation in just a moment. Hold on one second. And I want to share that. I don't want to share that. I do want to share that. Okay, so we're going to be talking about native Kentucky orchids today. I do work for the Cooperative Extension Service with the University of Kentucky. My background actually is in plants as far as graduate level is concerned. So, and I've always been fascinated with native plants, and Kentucky is really just a perfect state to celebrate and to search for all the really cool plants. We have about 2,700 different species of plants in Kentucky, and so native Kentucky orchids or orchids just make up a very small percentage of that. But we'll kind of go through this presentation, and I'm hoping that you'll get something out of the presentation about either just learning the different types that we have. Maybe it's some different some natural history about each of those, whatever it may be. But I'm hoping that you'll grab something that'll grab your attention and that you'll be able to take with you and either share or whatever it might be. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing is what makes an orchid an orchid. Orchids are perennial herbs. They have various leaf. They're simple, parallel veined, and because they're parallel veined, that becomes they fall into the group of what are called monocots or monocotyledons, or they may not have leaves at all. Okay. As far as flowers are concerned, they are bilaterally symmetrical, which means that if you think about a sunflower, so a sunflower can be it's symmetrical in any way that you cut it. But with orchids, generally the only way that it's going to be symmetrical on either side is if you cut it right down the middle. So it's what is called bilaterally symmetrical. And those generally come in three different types of flower arrangements. They are either solitary, which you'll see with the lady slippers, either in spikes, which you'll see in some of the like the coral orazas, which are the coral roots, and then Ora racine, which you'll see in the Platanthera species as we go through. They all have an enlarged third petal that forms a lip, and that lip can sometimes take a different shape, and you'll see some of the shapes as we go through of what those enlarged third petals look like, or that lip looks like. And then the fruit is always a capsule, okay? So the natural history of orchids, if we go through here, orchid is our largest family that we find in the world, and it's only rivaled by the asters. Orchids somewhere between 28 and 30,000. The thing is that primarily most of those are tropical, and as we start to get farther into jungles and areas where we've never been before, then we'll probably discover more species. With asters, there's about 21,000 known species right now. So orchids are a huge family, a lot of diversity in the species of orchids, okay? All native Kentucky orchids, and we have 42 known species. In Kentucky, we have one that is historically or has been historically found in Kentucky, but we have not seen it in 50 plus years. So we have 43, but what you're going to find in the state is generally 42 different species. And then, like it says there, when we get into tropical areas or Florida or some of those places like that, you're going to find species that are epiphytic. So most of ours are terrestrial, but as you get into Florida and the tropical areas, you're going to find that you'll find epiphytic species, which means that like ghost orchids and things like that, that they cling to trees and require that kind of host. That host situation with primarily trees. So in the habitats that we have in Kentucky, I list a few there: seeps, woodlands, fields, roadsides, barrens. You can find orchids in just about any habitat that we have in Kentucky. So but some of them require or have very specialized habitats. Due to lack of, when you think about the seeds of orchids, you're talking about almost basically dust. So if you've ever seen the seeds of orchids, especially native orchids, if you just happen to find like an old lady slipper or something like that, you can actually tap out the seeds in your hand, and they're basically like dust. So they spread airily. They have no endosperm, which means that they have no outer covering, which naturally feeds the seed on the inside. So they blow around and hope that they find a suitable soil site in order for them to be able to grow. And that's why the fungal relationship, that mycorrhizal relationship, is so important, because if they don't find that, then there is really no hope that they're going to grow. And so that's why they put out so many seeds. You'll just see just a mass of orchid seeds in each of those fruit situations. Orchid species are highly sensitive to ecological disturbance, and we'll talk a little bit about those disturbances in just a minute, but they do not react well to change. And then more than 50% of our native Kentucky orchids are in some level of distinction, which means that that they're either threatened or of special concern or infrequent or whatever in Kentucky, all the way up to endangered. And then we do have some species that are federally threatened or federally endangered in the state of Kentucky as well. So how does Kentucky compare to bordering states? When we look at Kentucky, we always, are trying to figure out like what it looks like around us. Plus, if there are species that border the state of Kentucky, like the one that I know is historical, there's, just across the border into Tennessee, we see those species, but we've not found them in, like I said, in Kentucky in 50 years. So this kind of gives you an idea of what you're dealing with. And remember, we have 42 species in Kentucky. So Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, West Virginia are fairly comparable to us. And then when you get into a little bit more mountainous area, I know that West Virginia is, but when you get into a little bit more mountainous area like Virginia and Tennessee, you see some spikes in populations that may require high elevation. And then also you get into some situations there also where you have boggy areas that we may not have, mountain swamp areas that we may not have here in Kentucky. And then Missouri with 35 species out on the western edge of our state. So human interaction. Orchids have a long history of herbal medicine uses, and so there's a lot of things that they were thought to cure. There is no current science that says that they do help with any of the ailments that they have been reported to have helped historically. So that's one really good reason. So if you're thinking, oh, they cure this, or I've read that they cure this, that is not a good reason for you to go out and collect them. So please make sure that they stay in their habitat. Digging up plants to put in home gardens is another issue with orchids. We've already talked about that mycorrhizal relationship and how important that is. So when you remove an orchid from that soil that it's been able to set in and set up in, then what you're essentially doing is removing it from that mycorrhizal relationship. And so that it becomes incredibly challenging, number one, to keep that plant going. And it may go for an entire year after that, but generally they do not fare well after they've been removed from their natural habitat. So I know that they're beautiful. They are things that I would love to have in my own garden, but I strongly encourage that if you do, or if you are interested in growing gardens, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as well, is that you go to a reputable site, a reputable source, and you have conversations with them about either how to grow them or purchasing them from those sources. And then another one, human interaction, and this is another disturbance that we get into as photographers and people who are passive appreciators of orchids and of all native plants. Our hiking trails and things like that, we're, as naturally as humans, we're very handsy on things. So we constantly want to touch things. We want to be closer to things. The more interaction you have with the area around it, the more disturbance that you can create around it. So you just want to be very conscious of those things. As I, over the last few months, have been doing these series called On the Ground, I try to be very aware of the fact that I don't want to compact the soil around it. I want to make sure that the soil stays in the same condition as I left it. So be aware of that. If you're out on a hike, just make sure that as you see things, just like if you see a snake, just like if you see a bear, appreciate it from the distance that it's at and go about your business from there. And then habitat loss and disturbance. And this obviously comes from as humans continue to encroach on natural areas, then we tend to lose the appropriate habitat to find native orchids and additional native plants in. So that becomes an issue as well. So buying plants, we talked a little bit more about talking about this in the last slide, but make sure you buy from a reputable source. I would go through, if you are interested, you can get on Facebook pages or join organizations like the Kentucky Native Plant Society. They are a fantastic resource and will give you an idea of where you can go and buy plants. You can also probably contact some of our state organizations, whether it be the Division of Forestry, whether it be the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, and they may be able to give you additional resources on where you could go and buy plants. You just don't want to buy plants from a source that has been going out and taking them out of nature, because once again, you may be getting a plant that may not survive more than a year anyway, in addition to the fact that they're going out and taking it from its natural environment. And then make sure that you research the process of growing orchids. It is extremely complicated to try and grow them for most orchid species. There are some orchid species that once you get them established, they almost become weedy. But it takes a minute to get there, and you want to make sure that you know what you're doing in order to take care of them. So stop by your local extension office, maybe go to a nursery. They're going to have somebody there who can kind of give you an idea, or at least point you in the right direction of somebody or of a resource to get you information about how to grow orchids appropriately. So these are the different Kentucky orchid genera that we have. You can see that we have a number of different genera. So when I talk about genera, I'm talking about the genus. So this is that, if you're looking at scientific names, this is that first word in there. This one is always capitalized. And then we get into individual species. That's what the numbers in the parentheses are on the outside of that. So just as an example, a plectrum, there's only one species of a plectrum that's found in Kentucky. Unlike with Platanthera, there's 8 different species of Platanthera that are found in Kentucky. So if you'll notice there, the asterisk on Epipactis, that denotes that it's a non-native species, and there are some areas in northern Kentucky where this is found. Like I said, it's non-native. And then the bold ones are ones that we'll actually cover throughout the presentation that we're going to do today. So let's get right into some of those different genera. The first one we'll start with is probably the one that a lot of people know the best, and this is the Cypripedium genera. These are the lady slippers. And so just to give you a little bit of information about that, most of them have 2 or more basal leaves. Really, there's only one that has the kind of 2 basal leaves like that, and that's the pink lady slipper. And then the others are colline, or which means that they climb the stems. And so as you see the stem coming up, you'll see leaves coming off of them, generally in an alternate pattern. The lip of the flower is a sac-like pouch, and so it almost looks like a little lady's slipper. And they do have leaves, they do lack a prominent mid-vein. So they are veined heavily, but generally do not have a heavy mid-vein. There are 5 different species currently found in Kentucky, and 58 species that are found globally. So we'll go through some of the individual species that we see in Kentucky. The first one is the Kentucky lady slipper. This one is Cypripedium kentuckiense. It's generally found on sandy stream banks. So it is susceptible to flooding and those kinds of things. So you have to make sure that the right conditions are present in order to be able to find it. It's it was previously listed as a different species of the yellow lady slipper, and it can be very tall. This can get to be about 36 inches tall or 3 feet tall, so it can be very tall, and it's also state endangered as well. We actually have a lower population than some of the surrounding states that have this particular flower. So Kentucky lady slipper. The pink lady slipper, this is probably the most common that people see. You'll find these in mixed coniferous hardwood forests, and it is the only member, like we had talked before, that has basal leaves. So you can see in this photograph here, the 2 basal leaves with that individual flower stalk that's coming out of the center of that. I'll list a couple of things, these historically medicinal uses or whatever. So this one was used to treat nervous conditions and present depression. But once again, there's no scientific evidence of that, and it's extremely common in its appropriate habitat. Where I took this photograph, there was probably 80 in this particular area. And if you go to the right areas, you can actually find just them growing in masses. But this one, weirdly, is extremely difficult to grow in a garden. So while in nature, you'll find them in these huge masses like this, it is extremely difficult to grow this one in a garden. Large yellow lady slippers. This one is Cypripedium parviflorum variation calceolus. There is another yellow lady slipper, which is small yellow lady slipper, which is Cypripedium parviflorum variation parviflorum. So it's found in moist, open deciduous forests. It has very large leaves on it. It's a very showy flower, as you can see in the photograph there. This one was also used to treat nervousness, and it is extremely frequent in the appropriate habitat that you found, that you may find. So like I said, moist areas, but once again, this one requires that mycorrhizal fungal relationship. So just because you go to a forest and you think, oh, this is a really moist area, this would be great for it, it may not be present there only because the appropriate fungal relationship doesn't exist there, or it just has not established itself. I mean, it's been said that with lady slippers, it can take up to 10 years in order for a seed to establish itself, and then take an additional 10 years in order for a flower to actually be present. So you may be looking at a flower that's, you know, those flowers that you see in the photograph may be anywhere from 10 to 40 years old. So the showy lady slipper, this is the one that is historical and is not found in Kentucky. So you, if you find this one in the state of Kentucky growing naturally, I would highly encourage you to contact Tara Littlefield Berry. She is the state botanist at the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, and let her know that you have found this plant, because it is, number one, beautiful, as you can see, and number two, we have not seen it in 50 years in Kentucky. So I would strongly encourage that you do that. It's found in seepy calcareous, which is limestone soil. This photograph was actually taken in Tennessee. It is a absolutely stunning flower. So it can be very large as well, just like the Kentucky lady slipper, up to 36 inches tall. But this is showy lady slipper, Cypripedium reginae, and like it says there, it may cause dermatitis in people who come in contact with it. So those are 4 of the Cypripedium or lady slippers. We'll move into the next group. So this is Platanthera. This is one that we have 100 species globally, and we have 8 species in Kentucky. And the flower, there's a lot of variance in the flower shape, and it does grow in a raceme. So you can see one that we'll talk about there, and then you'll see just the difference in the flowers. Really just stunning how different they are. So we'll get into it. The club spur orchid, Platanthera clavellata. This one is found in wet woodlands and open fields. And this one, when it talks about clavellate, it's the club-like spur. So if you see that long cylindrical piece that's coming off of it, you see that it ends fairly abruptly and fairly club-like. That is what it's talking about when it's saying the club spur orchid. And it's fairly frequent in Kentucky. The only issue is that it is very small, although it can get to be somewhere between 6 and 16 inches tall, which sounds big, but it's green and usually grows in tall vegetation as well. So it may be one that actually gets overlooked fairly often. This is ragged fringed orchid. You can see that it's found in wooded wetlands and open wet areas. It's heavily fringed. All of these will have a three-lobed lip. So if I go back, you can see the three-lobed lip on this one, although it just looks like just little notches. And then as we get into ragged fringe, you can see that it's extremely divided, and it's really kind of a unique flower. I mean, obviously none of these are going to look alike, so you're going to have unique shapes to all of them. But this is ragged fringed orchid. It's infrequent in Kentucky, and it may vary as far as color is concerned, but that's going to be one of the issues that you're going to find. Also, this one is green, so it may disappear amongst other vegetation. Yellow fringed orchid, this one obviously is going to stand out. The color of this one, even though it's called yellow fringed orchid, I generally see this one in a more orange color. It's found in acidic situations, but you can find it in a variety of habitats as long as it has that acidic soil to kind of rest in. So wet meadows, pine forests, roadsides, barrens, seeps, you're going to find it in a variety of habitats. Cherokee used the flower for this one as for fishing bait. So that's interesting. But please don't take the flowers just to use as fishing bait. Go to your local fishing shop to do that. And they can be frequent to locally abundant, especially in the areas where the habitat is appropriate. The purple fringeless orchid, this was the first time seeing this one for me this year, and it is absolutely stunning. Kind of a bright pink color, or I don't see the purple in it, but I see more of a pinkish color. I found this one in a roadside ditch. So you don't have to always go to the most immaculate habitat that you can ever find, but it was in a roadside ditch. And the conditions for growing this one were just appropriate. So it does have that three-lobed lip that you see there, and you can see that it does have that light fringe or kind of along the edge, even though it's called fringeless. Okay, it has that just a little bit of, I don't know what I would call that, but we'll just call it fringeless, but fringy. Okay, and it is infrequent in Kentucky. This is one that is, and this picture is not great of it, but this is one that is found in very boggy areas and wooded wetlands. This is a white fringeless orchid, which is Platanthera integralabia. And this one is solid white, except for obviously the stem. And this one is a candidate for federal listing. And that is primarily because of habitat loss and the unique habitat that it's actually found in. So, so a very interesting plant. And I've counted, like it says it's threatened in Kentucky, and that's because in the area that I know that it grows in, you can find upwards of 100 plants that grow there. The problem is, though, is that may be the only area that it grows in. So really unique, beautiful plant. Now, a lot of the Platantheras, they're pollinated by butterflies. And so as butterflies go into them, what will happen is the pollinia that you see, and if you look on some of the others here, the pollinia are the two little knobs that you're seeing sticking out. Okay, and so as butterflies and other insects get in there, what happens is they generally get the pollinia on their eyes, and so that's how they move pollen around. Really kind of unique. So we'll get into the Goodyear species. There's 100 that are found globally and 2 that are found in Kentucky. These have multiple basal leaves with a single stalk of flowers on a raceme. That raceme is one of the indicators of what kind of species, and the leaves are very important as far as the indication of what species you're looking at. And it says they are distinctly variegated leaves. If you look in that photograph, at the base of that plant, you can see that variegated or those heavy white veins in the leaves. So getting into those, this is the most common one. This is probably the most common orchid that we see in Kentucky. So this is the greater rattlesnake plantain. This one is found in a variety of habitats in Kentucky, dry to mesic woods, but that basically covers Kentucky. If you have a forest, if you have any area with trees in it, there's the possibility you could see this one. If you notice in the photograph, at the base of this one has a heavy white midvein. And so that's one of the key indicators of this one. Also, if you look at the raceme, it is a very full raceme that is symmetrical all the way around the raceme, which means it has flowers on all sides of it. Like I said, extremely frequent. This is Goodyear pubescens. It is very hairy. If you look at the flower stalk there, you can see that it does have pubescence that runs all the way up it, and the leaves do have pubescence on them as well. This one is the lesser rattlesnake plantain, which is Goodyear repens. This is found in cool, moist forests, and it is known from only one location in all of Kentucky. It does not have a midvein, and at the end of the presentation, I'll show you the leaves of this one, but it is very rare. I saw it once 20 years ago and saw it for the first time again this year. It is a really beautiful flower, but it is extremely rare and grows only in this one little spot. And so it's very protected, even though in reality it's not very protected at all. So the next group that we're going to look at is Corallarasa. There's 11 global species and 3 found in Kentucky, and these are mycoheterotrophic, which means that they're totally dependent on fungi associated to other plants. You will not find any leaves on these, so they just basically appear out of the forest floor, and they are so hard to see because the stems are all brown, and if you look, generally the bigger flower portions of it are covered up by the other flower parts. So, so we'll get into this as well. So this is fall coral root. This one actually should be in bloom, or was in bloom probably a week or 2 ago. Corallarasa odontorasa, and it's very odontorasa simply means that it's very fragrant, and so it does have a smell to it. This one is found in a variety of habitats, and you can find this one throughout Kentucky, but it's one of those that doesn't really stand out. So you have to be actually looking at it to see it. The other thing about this one is that as you see it in the photograph there, the flowers may never open up. So what you're seeing there may be as good as it gets. Occasionally you will find flowers that open up, but they may not at all. So this is one that's not terribly showy, so we don't really see it or pay attention nearly as much, but it is infrequent in Kentucky, and that may simply be because we just don't understand the population dynamics of this particular plant. This is spring coral root. This one comes out obviously in May, late April, early May, depending on where you're at in the state. It's found in mesic woods, and it does have those wavy margins on the lip of the flower, and it's infrequent in Kentucky. And I've seen this plant twice, and I've gone back to those same locations, and it has not reappeared. And so sometimes what happens is that it gets kind of shaded out by some of our invasives. And the one area I saw this one in became heavily trafficked by bush honeysuckle. And so getting those invasives out of the space will generally open it up for some of the beautiful flowers like this to exist. The next one is the Neodia species. This is also used to be called the Listera genera. And so there are 67 species found globally, 2 found in Kentucky. These have generally 2 small leaves that are opposite on the raceme. So this is Appalachian twayblade. This is Neodia smallii, and so it's forested mountain wetlands is where you'll find this one. I have never seen this plant in Kentucky. This flower is actually this photograph was actually taken in North Carolina. So I saw it there, but I've never seen it in Kentucky, and it's threatening Kentucky. But the flowers I saw in North Carolina, if they are any indication of how hard it is to find it, it is extremely difficult, because I think it was about 3 to 4 inches tall. So not the biggest plant that I've ever seen, but and brown, so it's not like it's showy either. So it can be very difficult to see. Getting into the Liparis group, or Liparis genera, the 350 found globally. So this is a pretty good size genera of orchids, and there's 2 actually found in Kentucky. And they will flower somewhere between spring to midsummer. So this is lily leaf twayblade. It is found in Liparis lilifolia. It's found in moist forest slopes and stream banks, and the leaves are very thick. It has these really kind of heavy basal leaves there, and it's infrequent in Kentucky, although I've seen this one in locations in a variety of spots. Okay. I'm getting a reminder that I need to turn in my presentation. Isotria, so this is there are 2 species found globally and 2 species found in Kentucky, of which I've seen 1 of these. So this is there's a single flower on stalk depending on the species and the varying colors of sepals. So the one that we'll look at today is large world begonia, Isotria verticillata, and it can be found in a variety of woodland types. Dry to mesic, it does have purplish sepals and this lip streaked with purple. Okay, you don't see much of it on there. This one was a little bit late in the season, so I think it had faded, and it's infrequent in Kentucky. The other one that you would find in Kentucky is small world begonia, and it is Isotria medialoides, and it is extremely difficult, and it gets confused a lot with another plant because of the way the leaves actually look on the stalk. But it only has, each of these plants only have 1 single flower, and this is an southeastern United States plant. So the next family, or I mean not the family, the next genera is Hexalectris. There are 10 species that are found globally and 1 found in Kentucky, and this is another one that is myco-heterotrophic. So it actually grows on around the roots of other plants. Okay, so it does not have a leaf present. So it's called crested coral root. This is Hexalectris spicata. It's found in dry domestic woodlands in the vicinity of oaks, red cedars, and pines. So usually around one of those, so most of those oaks that we're talking about are generally things like black oak and southern red oak. So it does have a acidic soil preference, but I don't think that that's an absolute. The brown stalk with a terminal raceme of flowers with a deeply purple wavy lip, and it is infrequent in Kentucky. So this one shows up and you're always pleasantly surprised. It does have a very showy flower, and Hexalectris, that genus, actually has to do with, if you look at that flower, if you look at the lip, it does have these kind of raised combs on it, almost like a rooster's comb. And so that's where it comes from. Although I think it only has 6, and I think Hexalectris means 7, but I'm not sure about that. So the next group that we're going to get into, so this one was actually moved. So it used to be in it used to be in the genera Cleistes, so Cleistes, but now it's been moved into its own genera, which is Cleistesiopsis. And so this one, this is the only one that's found in Kentucky. There are 3 species that are found globally. It does have this column with the lip, but it does have the spreading sepals that you see on the back as well. So individual flower. This is small spreading begonia, Cleistesiopsis bifaria. and it's found in acidic soils. It's rare in Kentucky, although I found it in 3 different locations. So it's one that if you just pay attention to, it grows in the spring, that there is the possibility you could find it, especially in very acidic situations. Um, I have seen it up on ridge tops. I've also seen it in boggy areas. So it does have some variation as far as it's concerned. And if you look at the lip, it's just really stunning because it has yellow and bright pink. It's just a beautiful flower, really, really beautiful flower. Tipularia, there are 7 global species, 1 found in Kentucky. Now this one is extremely unique because if you looked at it, if you found it in the spring or the summer, you would think, oh, this is another one that's mycoheterotrophic. And it is not. This one actually is unique because it gets a green leaf in the fall and the winter, and then that green leaf dies back, and then in the summer the flower stalk comes up. So it does have a green leaf that's present. It just grows in a different season. So it's really kind of a cool plant. And when you find one of these, you'll find the leaves generally in the winter because they stand out. The plant itself will not stand out. If you look at it there, it's another one of the orchids that's brown, not terribly showy, but it does stand out in the winter. So if you can mark locations where you found it, you can always go back and find it. Hopefully, find it later on in the summer when it does flower, and that's usually in June when it does flower. So this is the one species in Kentucky. This is cranefly orchid, Tipularia discolor, and it's found in mesic woods. Uniquely has like I said, explained all of the leafing situation. It's really kind of unique that way, and it's frequent in Kentucky. So we see this one a lot. It's a very common orchid to find in Kentucky. We just don't pay attention to it because it's so thin, it's so brown, and it blends in with generally almost any background that you're going to find in a forested area. The next group, or the next genera we're going to look at, is Spyranthus, and there's 48 global species and 8 species that we find in Kentucky. And these are really beautiful flowers, and they kind of show up in the best places. So it's a single spiraling stalk of flowers with basal or calling leaves present, or may not be during the flowering period for this plant. So, and I think I only have one representative of this one, which is the spring ladies' tresses, Spyranthus vernalis. This one's found in fields and meadows, and the key identifying thing is that it has 5 flowers in a single twist. So as it twists, it'll have 5 flowers within that twist. It is infrequent in Kentucky, and some of these are rare in Kentucky. Some of these are very common in Kentucky. So this is a plectrum. So we had talked about before with Tipularia. It has the leaf that comes up. This is the other one that has a leaf that'll come up. So if you notice in the photograph here, this is the leaf that comes up in the winter, in the fall, and in the winter. So once again, this is one of those plants where you can actually find it in the fall or the winter, but it may be more difficult to find in the spring because it's not terribly showy. Now, it's a much more beautiful flower, or at least in my mind, than the cranefly orchid, but this is our representative here in Kentucky. So 1 global, 1 found in Kentucky. So this one was kind of unique. This is putty root. It's also called Adam and Eve orchid, a Plectrum hyemale. It's found in dry to mesic woods. Excuse me. And I've explained the leafing situation there. The reason it's called putty root is because of the root is very malleable, and so it does have this kind of mucilaginous root system that was used as a kind of a putty substitute. And it's infrequent in Kentucky. And I would say that that's primarily because people see the leaves and they probably don't pay attention to the population of them, but it's currently listed as infrequent in Kentucky. And then the last one we're going to look at is Galearis. There are 10 species that are found globally and one found in Kentucky. So this one was also called, also in the genera Orchis, or in the genus Orchis. I think it's in Galearis now, but if you see it listed in literature, it could either be Orchis or Galearis. It has 2 petals and 3 sepals, fused pink and white lip. And you can see that's kind of a purplish pink flower with that white lip that extends below it. The one that we have in Kentucky is Showy Orchis, or Galearis spectabilis. It grows in rich hardwood forests, and especially around streams. And 2 opposite leaves. This one does have basal leaves with those pink and white flowers that grow in a raceme and grow in a pretty heavy cluster. So this one grows close to the ground and is infrequent in Kentucky, but it can be locally common. So some of the resources that I used, so Dr. Jones, Ronald Jones' book, Plant Life of Kentucky, is a fantastic resource. Dennis Warren and Tavia Cathcart's book, Wildflowers of Tennessee, the Ohio Valley, and the Southern Appalachians. That is a great field guide, and excuse me, has some great information in it. So that's one that I would definitely encourage that you pick up. And then Dr. Barnes, Thomas Barnes, Deborah White, and Mark Evans, their book, Rare Wildflowers of Kentucky, is a really outstanding resource. So any of these books this is what I refer to in putting together the presentation, but they would be great to have either in your house or and if you're going out in the field. The Wildflowers of Tennessee book is definitely one that's a little bit more manageable to put in a backpack and take out with you. So let me get out of that. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So I hope that you have enjoyed the presentation. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is eric, E-R-I-C, .comley, C-O-M-L-E-Y, @uky.edu. And thank you so much. I sure do appreciate it, and I welcome any questions. So please have a wonderful day. Thank you.